Yesterday, I went and did a double feature of Backrooms and Obsession, two massive indie horror films that are making the rounds. I feel like I was a little late to the party, but I'm glad I took out a couple of hours and went and saw both of these films back to back. I'm gonna give some quick thoughts on Backrooms first, and then I'll give some thoughts on Obsession as well. Starting off with Backrooms, this is directed by 20-year-old Kane Parsons, also known as Kane Pixels on YouTube. This is his debut feature film, and Kane is most famously known for his interpretation of the Backrooms internet folk legend. His interpretation is generally in the community considered to be fairly canon, and a lot of fans of the Backrooms folk legend were very happy to see that he indeed was the one directing this film. And I'll be honest, the Backrooms is not maybe my all-time favorite creepypasta, but it is one that has been pretty popular and one that I've seen a couple videos of, especially a couple of Kane's videos over the years, and it was pretty cool to see some of these elements directly quoted or referenced in the film as well. Now, I am gonna get into the story of the film and just give a breakdown of the plot. If you haven't seen the film yet and you don't want to be spoiled, you can skip over to this timestamp right here, and from that point onwards in the review, I won't be discussing any spoilers. So I'll give you a moment to skip if you haven't already, and if you're still here, let's get into the actual plot. The film is primarily about two characters, Clark, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Mary, played by Renate Reinsve. So Clark is a furniture store owner who's always dreamed about being an architect. His store isn't doing too well. He used to be married but isn't anymore, and throughout the film we learn that this is because of his drinking problems and because of his tendency to overwork and not really give a lot of time to his family. The second primary character, Mary, is a therapist, and again throughout the film we learn that she has some childhood trauma relating to her mentally ill mother who would keep her shut in the house and possibly give her a sense of claustrophobia. And this really shows up later on in the film during certain chase sequences where Mary is forced to kind of go through these narrow corridors, and you can see the fear and shock that she has on her face. Anyways, around the second act of the film, Clark discovers the Backrooms. He begins mapping them out. At one point, he takes two of his assistants in the Backrooms with him, and then some entity ends up killing or maiming both of these assistants as well. At that point, Clark returns and he visits Mary again. Initially, Mary doesn't fully believe him when he talks about the Backrooms, but when he disappears, she visits his store and then she is sucked into the Backrooms as well. During this visit, she runs around a bit and then encounters Clark, who's acting a bit strange. He chokes her out. She wakes up at a dinner table where we sort of slowly realize that, Clark's gone full-on insano mode. And the idea sort of is that he's turned into this person because of his own inability to change and grow. And we see that when the initial therapy session at the start of the film is kind of mirrored during this dinner table conversation where Mary and Clark do the same role play that they did in one of the film's earlier scenes. And we see that Clark has just sort of worsened and hasn't really shown any sign of improvement, possibly due to the effect that staying in the Backrooms this long has had on him. Now, at this point, it was a bit strange because it felt like Clark had only been in there for a couple of days, but my theory is, and some discourse I've seen on the internet also points to this, that time sort of moves a bit differently in the Backrooms. During this dinner table scene, some of the still lives or these memories of people that are stuck in the Backrooms, they surround Mary and Clark, and Clark points out that these still lives are actually edible, and he just grabs a chunk of their flesh essentially and just eats them. And after he says this, the bigger entity that had been chasing them throughout the film, Pirate Clark, that's essentially like a deformed version of the protagonist Clark, comes in and has a chunk of Clark's flesh, eats him, kills him. Mary runs away and is chased by Clark, or by Pirate Clark, throughout the Backrooms. Right as she sort of escapes Clark, she is found by some of the Async researchers. Async is this organization that is either researching the Backrooms or actually developed the Backrooms. I'm leaning more towards the latter, considering that they used to make MRI machines and like the whole discussion that Mark Duplass's character has with Mary at the end of the film. Anyways, we sort of end on this ambiguous note where Mary is having a conversation with Mark Duplass's character, and then there's this like very haunting final shot of some of the new locations that have popped up at the Backrooms, and in the end we see a still life version of Mary as well. Now, my understanding is that Mary herself did not die. It's more so that that still life version of Mary is the memories of Clark rather than like Mary's own memories, because we do see Clark's body in the async research facility as well. The ending was a little confusing, a little ambiguous, but yeah, that's essentially a quick rundown of the plot. Now let's get into what I liked about the film and what I didn't like about the film. Firstly, I thought the cinematography was amazing. The production design, the overall atmosphere, the eerie nature of the Backrooms, the look and feel of the film overall was really, really well done. It's not easy to make a person feel tense and nervous and on edge just looking at a bunch of empty rooms, but Kane, Parsons and co really did a great job imbuing that sense of dread in the film's overall look and feel. I thought the acting by both Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Reinsve was really, really good. For instance, in one of the film's earlier scenes, Chiwetel's character is having a tense conversation and he does something with his hands which just added so much depth to that scene. Similarly, Renate Reinsve has obviously in films like The Worst Person in the World, Sentimental Value, has shown she's just an amazing actor in any role that you put her in. In this film especially, she just has so much emotion in her eyes. Like you can really feel the fear, the dread that she has. Also, the makeup and the costume design was really good, especially for the still lifes in the film. It was definitely like CGI'd, but the overall aesthetic was really cool. I thought also in terms of the characterization, Clark's character specifically did have a lot of depth. You know, I could understand his motivations. The way his character has his arc throughout the film is also very understandable, feels pretty realistic. I can't really say the same for Renate Reinsve character, Mary. On that note, let's get into what I didn't like about the film. Mainly, it was just the writing. For instance, as I mentioned, how Mary's character was a little underutilized. I also thought Mark Duplass's character was very, very underutilized, not just because Mark Duplass himself is a great actor when it comes to horror films, but also just because I thought his character was important to the story, but doesn't really do much until the third act, where he's essentially used for a bit of an exposition dump. And just generally, I thought the writing of the film was a little weak. The dialogue at times felt a bit clunky, and also the pacing was a little off. I felt like the first act flew by and was very tightly paced. The second act started to drag quite a bit, and then the third act just felt a little disjointed. Like there were these big action scenes, exposition dump, action scene, exposition dump, and I don't know, I just did not like how abruptly the film ended. I understand the need to have sort of an ambiguous ending, or you know, kind of ending it on the note that they did, but considering that this is a mainstream entry for a pretty niche internet folk legend, I thought they should have either like gone the full route and kept it fully ambiguous, or they should have explained it a bit more clearly. The kind of halfway route that the film takes just left a bit to be desired. Overall, pretty good film. Has some flaws, but again, considering this was made by a 20-year-old, considering that this was a debut feature film, it's pretty impressive. I would highly recommend it if you're a fan of the series. I would also recommend it if you would just like to watch a nice atmospheric horror film. Moving on to Obsession. So after my friends and I watched Backrooms, we left the cinema, had a little debrief session at a cafe, and then I said goodbye to them. They had both already seen Obsession, so I went in solo to finish the second half of my double feature day. Obsession is made by 26-year-old Curry Barker. This is his sophomore film. His debut film was Milk and Cereal, made on a shoestring $800 budget. Obsession, on the other hand, was made on a similarly tight but slightly larger $750,000 budget and grossed at this point $250 million. Insane ROI, like going from a sub $1 million budget to grossing 250 million is historic. Also, the comedy sketch creator to horror auteur pipeline is goated. It's very similar to what Jordan Peele did, and now Jordan Peele is like one of the greatest horror directors that we have today. Obsession also fits very neatly into the incel horror subgenre, similar to films like Companion, The Menu, Blink Twice, where the real horror isn't anything supernatural. It's more so a nice guy that feels entitled to a woman's body or a woman's attention or her affection. Also, before I get into my full thoughts, just funny side note, the cinema that I watched it in was for some reason playing it with Arabic subtitles the full time. I know a lot of my audience isn't based in Pakistan, so the reason that's kind of insane is because no one actually speaks Arabic in Pakistan. Secondly, with Backrooms, the theater was mostly empty. With Obsession, it was full, and I was sitting like right in the middle. A few rows ahead of me, this guy was taking pictures with flash like every 15 minutes, and then halfway through the film he just like perched his feet up on the seat ahead of him, and then he was taking pictures and the shadow of his foot would just get imprinted on the projector like every time he would take a picture, and it kind of took me out of it at times. But to be fair, the film is just so good that despite all of these distractions and issues, I still had a great time watching it. On that note, let's get into the story. Again, for a portion of this review, I will be going over some spoilers. If you haven't seen the film yet and you want to skip past all these spoilers, you can navigate to this timestamp over here, and from that point onwards, I won't be discussing any spoilers. With that said, let's get into it. So the film is about Bear, played by Michael Johnston, and Nikki, played by Inde Navarrette. Bear has a crush on Inde. He visits a gift shop and finds a one-wish willow, and upon failing to confess his love for her, he breaks the one-wish willow, and immediately Nikki develops an obsession for him. They begin dating, but Nikki's behavior slowly begins getting a bit erratic. Firstly, she holds a memorial for Bear's dead cat, then she cooks his cat and feeds it to him. He would wake up and find her staring at him from the corner of the room. Their friends Ian and Sarah, played by Cooper Tomlinson and Megan Lawless respectively, begin getting a bit suspicious, but Bear is so smitten with Nikki's love that he just disregards all of their concerns. And there are points throughout the film where Nikki's behavior feels a bit broken, in the sense that she would act one way and then suddenly whiplash and like attack herself. Obviously, the reasoning here is, as we learn later, that Nikki's real self has been trapped in her body with a fake obsessive persona created by Bear's wish, and every time the real Nikki tries to come out, it just causes some sort of chaos. And there's this very haunting scene where all of this is revealed when Bear calls the One Wish Willow helpline, and the representative, played by Curry Barker, asks if he wants to talk to the real Nikki, and all we hear is just the most heartbreaking screaming coming from the real Nikki, wanting to get out, wanting to be free. The customer representative also tells him that his wish can't be reversed unless he unalives himself or Nikki. Then there's this party scene where all of the characters are playing Jenga. Nikki recites this incestuous, weird version of Hansel and Gretel, freaks everyone out, then stabs herself, freaks everyone out even more. It's just an insane scene that had me at the edge of my seat the entire time. Once they get home, Nikki threatens to unalive herself if Bear doesn't stop arguing with her and doesn't join her in bed. And then there's this, well, two scenes almost like back to back. When Nikki is kind of having her meltdown and suddenly like screams and starts walking in reverse, just gave me the creeps. That was so well done, so well acted. And then also the scene where Bear gets a message from Sarah to meet her outside, and when he sneaks out, the real Nikki wakes up while the obsessive persona is asleep and begs Bear to get rid of her. And while Nikki is literally begging him to end her so that she can be at peace, Bear refuses because he gets offended that Nikki would rather die than stay with him. And that's really the point where I'm seeing a lot of discourse on the internet about like who was in the wrong. But if you genuinely felt like Bear was the victim there and you watch that scene, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know, like, like, have some media literacy. Like, it's so obviously a film where Nikki is the victim. Nikki is literally trapped while a guy that she sees as a friend, maybe even as a brother, going back to that Hansel and Gretel thing, is, doing all of these things to her. Like, I don't know how you could, like, watch the whole film in its entirety and still think that Bear is the victim. Sorry, I got so, like, riled up about that point, but anyways, moving on. Once Bear goes to meet Sarah, obviously what we knew was going to happen happens. Nikki pops out from behind, kills Sarah, and then Nikki goes to Ian's house, tries to get him to break the one wish willow because he can break it himself since he's had his one wish already. And Ian just does the most best friend rage baiting thing where he just, like, breaks it while wishing for $1 billion, and then, like, actually $1 billion, like, rain down. Bear goes home, he finds Nikki wearing Sarah's dress. Ian comes in, she kills Ian. Sarah's body is there in the corner, just fully, like, messed up. Bear tries to off himself, swallow a lot of his grandmother's sleeping pills, and right as he does it, he begins to reconsider it, and he's about to throw up, and then we hear a crack. Nikki's persona wishes for Bear to be as obsessed with her as she is with him, and then love struck, he gets out. They embrace, and for the first time in the entire film, they kiss with a passion that actually feels real, that actually feels like a rom-com moment if it wasn't for all the blood and gore around them. And, it's ironic because now neither of these characters are their real selves. At that point, the pills that Bear took start to poison him. Nikki, firstly, her obsessive persona has a moment of grief where she watches him die, and then the real Nikki comes out and she has this, like, moment of grief and pain and horror as well. Like, imagine you are finally in your body and all of your friends are there, but they're not really there anymore, and that's the note that the film ends on. It's crazy. I don't know, it was an intense watch. I really, really enjoyed it. And anyways, at this point, let's actually get into what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy about the film. So here's what I liked. I loved the writing. I thought it was very, very smartly written, avoided any sort of annoying exposition throughout its tight, I think, 1 hour 45 minute runtime. There was so much lore packed into it as well, such satisfying character arcs. The production design itself was also very, very lived in. Even though this was shot on such a small budget, the sets were very smartly put together, the lighting was very well done, and so many smart production choices, reusing set elements in certain ways, using light very cheaply but in a way that did not look cheap, using maybe not very expensive cameras but still giving the film a very premium look. All of this is not just aesthetically well done, but also from a production standpoint. Managing all of this with such limited resources is genuinely so impressive. This does not look anything like a film with such a small budget usually looks like. And then let's get into the performances. I thought, of course, Daniel Johnston was good, Cooper Tomlinson was good. Everyone had strong performances, but Inde Navarrette maybe gave one of the best horror performances I've seen in recent years. I don't always love to use this term, like scream queen, but very literally she was a scream queen in the sense that her vocal range in the film, her expressions, the way she was able to move and contort her body in certain scenes as well, just absolutely insane work in the best way possible. Reminded me so much of Toni Collette in Hereditary. I honestly feel like she might get nominated for an Oscar for this one. And then, of course, I thought the overall directing and editing was so well done. Inde Navarrette's performances were further bolstered by the fact that Curry Barker really knows when to make a shot linger, when to cut, how to position a shot, how to really, like, instill a constant sense of dread and fear. And this leads into the other thing I really loved about the film is just as a horror film, it works so well. The scares are so well done. At times it relies on horror tropes and at times it subverts them. So for instance, there's this, like, recurring scene with a bathroom mirror that doesn't, like, fully close. And if you've even seen, like, 3 horror films over the years, you know that a bathroom mirror that doesn't close, ultimately when it does close and the camera angle changes, we are going to see something scary in the background. Never happens throughout the film. And the fact that you always have a feeling that something's going to happen but it doesn't just makes the dread even worse. And then there are times where the film actually does go through with certain tropes, like a shot would be set up in a way that, oh, you have the character here and like something scary is gonna like pop out from this corner, and then it does. But the way that it happens and then what happens immediately afterwards would be completely unexpected. So that's what I mean by the fact that Curry Barker really knows his horror films. He really knows what the tropes are, and he really, really knows how to subvert them very well. And I mean, there really isn't much that I did not like about the film. If I had to be nitpicky, I felt like some plot points or like the overall arc for some characters felt a little predictable, just because things were kind of foreshadowed early on in the film and it became a little obvious, like, okay, like we saw this one thing happen, this thing's definitely going to happen to this character. But again, that's such a like nitpicky thing to complain about. The A plot of the film, the performances, the writing, the directing, the cinematography, the overall look and feel, everything was so well done. And I'm not saying like it was well done for a film with a budget this small. I'm saying it was like objectively like well done. A film with 10 times the budget, but with a cast and crew that isn't as talented, could not have come up with something this good. And yeah, that's my thoughts on both Backrooms and Obsession. I'm so glad I went out and had a stressful, scared shitless 4 hours watching these films back to back. Really, really recommend you do the same, or at least watch them, at some point in the next couple of weeks while they're still up in your local cinema. I definitely recommend watching both of these films in a theater, not just because these are films that work well in a theater, but also because I think it's just good to support indie filmmakers having their moment. I'm just so happy that films like this exist, that 2026 is the year where we're seeing films like Obsession, Backrooms, Iron Lung, Shelby Oaks, a lot of YouTubers coming up with their debut or their sophomore films and seeing genuine success out of the release of these films as well. Not just, makes me happy as a YouTuber, but it's also inspiring for myself personally. Really makes me want to revisit some half-written scripts that I have and try to make something out of it. This is for yourself as well. If you're someone who's been thinking about making a film, you have all of these examples of people who really took the leap and it worked out for them. This inspired me. I hope it's been an inspiring year for you as well, if you are a creator and if you are someone interested in pursuing filmmaking. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here. If you've stuck around here till the end, thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more of it. No worries if not, and I hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.